What brings a man to his knees is the woman that he loves. If you take away that woman, you take away his heart. If his woman's life is taken, that man's soul is taken. He can drink away those tears, wallowing in his own self-pity and grief. He can self-destruct and turn out the lights, or he can simply lock it all away and remain nothing more than an empty vessel, counting down every minute that he sees his woman again in the afterlife. Edgar Mortensen chose the latter. All he was and all that he ever will be was the woman that he loved, his late wife Annabelle. Given that Annabelle has been long deceased, Edgar Mortensen simply remained as dead inside as she was dead in life. As he knew, he lacked the will to buy his own ticket into his wife's arms in the sky. What seemed like eternal suffering, each beat of his heart equated to a blow to his stomach. For every second he remained alive without his love. But what if he had the chance to speak to her again? What if he had the chance to be with her? If he could simply hold her again and kiss those beautiful, luscious lips she once had, he would forever be grateful to the Lord he once believed in. Every night he prayed, he simply wished for nothing more than to be with her again. Something about this particular night meant that his prayers may have been answered. Or were they? On the 15-year anniversary of her death, Edgar slept in his lonely bed and dreamed of sweet Annabelle. He saw her charming smile and heard her darling voice, and her perfume took charge of his senses in a way that made him ooze with love and admiration. He felt a wave of content and comfort from this dream, as she was the only haven he had in this cold, miserable world, and the idea of even dreaming of her brought a kind of light back into his life that he could not attain in consciousness. Not even the clashes of thunder outside could interrupt this Academy Award-winning picture in his damaged mind. Her voice was so powerful to him in this dream that it woke him up out of his slumber. His crusty eyes opened to the sound of her, and a flash of lightning flooded his eyes. Edgar pulled the quilt over his head to avoid the rays of blue light that poured through the bedroom window. Edgar loved storms, but he loved them because Annabelle loved them. Now, they are just a reminder of what he lost. "You know I love thunderstorms," a delightful voice said from beyond. Edgar's head popped out from under the covers and jolted back and forth in all directions. There was nobody there but himself, and the storm outside that appeared to be mocking him. That is until another flash of lightning forced him to open and close his eyes in a split second, as if the universe acknowledged his internal begging and pleading for the gift of his lost heart. Annabelle appeared from the thin atmosphere. She was as gorgeous as ever, yet ghoul-like, a manner which he had never seen her before. Her eyes, while captivating, were uncanny and eerie. They looked at him with fierce seduction, the way a tiger would gaze at their prey in the jungle. Edgar's face dripped with sweat and tears. His stomach turned upside down, and his knees grew weak. For what appeared to be a ghostly return, the room was rather warm than it would have been cool, given that this encounter rendered the characteristics of a visit from the dead. "Darling, you've come back to me," Edgar cried. "Edgar, my love," she whispered. Her voice had a tone of reverb in the air that sent a chill up his spine, like the way her voice sounded when they made love, but spookier and colder. Edgar felt a slight, subconscious feeling of dread. He did his best to lie to himself and pretend that he was ecstatic to see her, but something felt off to him. This was Annabelle in real time, but it wasn't quite Annabelle. He knew it, but he didn't know it. Edgar didn't know what to feel. He was simply amazed that she was actually there, and he was left at a loss for intelligible words. "Do you want to come with me?" Annabel asked. Edgar sat up in his bed, swallowed a gulp of saliva, and nodded in a timid trance. "Yes, my love," he whispered. "Then kiss me," she said. Edgar surprised himself, as he was hesitant to do what he could only have dreamed of doing for the past 15 years. He remained idle and visibly reluctant. "Come to me, sweetheart. Come give me a kiss," Annabel whispered. "Come give me a kiss, and you will be with me for all of eternity." He leaned forward and caught himself. Annabel simply stood before him at the side of the bed and smiled with slight menace. He thought about death, when it finally came knocking, giving him every opportunity to spend the rest of time with his loved one. Something felt unsettling to him. Did he not want to die after all? Or was he disturbed by this unusual presence of his pride and joy? Thoughts ran through his head at rapid speeds, and Annabel simply stood there with that venomous smile, a smile he could not recognize anymore. "I'm afraid," Edgar whispered, with slight shame. "Don't be afraid," Annabel said. She held out her hand to him with a lighter smile, her eyes still raging with demonic lust. Edgar leaned in, grabbed her hand, and shut his eyes tight. He puckered his lips and waited for Annabel to plant a kiss on him. But she didn't lean in. Confused, Edgar opened his eyes to see Annabel still standing before him, like a statue, with a glimpse of violation on her face. Their hands remained interlocked, with light force. "Kiss me, darling," she said, as sweetly as she sounded cold. "Don't be afraid." Edgar slowly moved closer to her, while remaining on the bed. He examined her face and spotted small cracks in her once silky pores. She had a yellowish tint in her eyes, as if she had been plagued, and they were as glassy as the crystal she left behind in her china cabinet in the dining room. As he placed his lips upon hers, with his eyes shut, he noticed that she did not kiss him in return, and his eyes snapped open. He noticed that her unnerving gaze remained intact, and that she was still in her deathly trance, with a now gruesome grin on her face. Edgar whipped his head back in horror, with an instinct to silently evaluate her behavior that curdled his blood. After a moment of contemplation, Edgar's throat began to close. He tried to breathe, but the breathing came out a wheeze. Hot flashes began to overcome him, and he keeled over, off the side of the bed onto the floor, and clenched his fingers into his chest. The years upon years of memories, all of which contained the happiest of Annabel, the one he knew, returned to him in flashes as he struggled to catch his breath. The kiss appeared to be a means of joining her in the afterlife, an invitation to rest together, soul to soul. But as he reminisced on the fondness he had for his darling dearest Annabel, he realized that the entity he placed his lips on this evening was not Annabel at all. It was, in fact, the opposite of Annabel, whom he considered an angel. It was pure evil, and pure evil can only be personified through the devil himself. Edgar, as he regurgitated his own blood, realized that he had been bamboozled. What he assumed to be a welcome to his idea of paradise was actually an enslavement within his own personal hell. Annabel was no more, and neither was Edgar. The light slowly faded in his eyes as his body grew stiff. His entire life with her, now a seeming instant, was to be forgotten as he suffered through the portal to the flaming nether. What stood before him was the most vile-looking spirit that mankind had never laid eyes on, Annabel, who ferociously morphed into what can only be described as a deadly, daring demon. the most demonic of all demons. He, the father of temptation and evil. As Edgar took his final half-breath, he asked himself what he did to deserve this, and then he simply muttered his final word. Why? The devil kneeled before him, with a smile of pity and rage, and ran its long, needle-like fingers through his hair. Because you were next, he said, as he shrugged his shoulders. The light in Edgar's eyes burnt out, and the devil disintegrated into the atmosphere. The dust of his embodiment flew through the window and left Edgar's corpse there to rot, as his soul was now in the devil's possession.